everyone, and welcome back to another edition of High School Roundup. I'm John Sakaguchi. Joined with me, as always, my good friend John Sape. John, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing real good. Just had some lunch. I'm feeling good now. Now it's time to get ready into some football.
Yeah, we were starting to wonder if you were going to be able to show. I was sitting here thinking, is this the week that I do an episode of Roundup with Gary?
No, I was always coming back.
But anyway, a lot to talk about this week. A lot of good games, a lot of close ones. Again, in another week where we have a good set of highlights coming to you from our friends at WMBS and South Union Township. This week's game is Uniontown at Brownsville, so let's take a look at the highlights.
Set with Maurice Jackson off to his left, twin receivers to the far side. Richardson slips, cuts up the middle, lost the football, and did Brownsville recover? Yes, they did. For the Brownsville 22, Praster takes the snap. He's going to put it up, throw near side. That'll be intercepted. Devin George on the run back, and it's a pick six for the Uniontown Red Raiders. Richardson this time going there to Jackson. Big hole on the left side. Jackson inside the 20, inside the 10, and Jackson will take it in for a Uniontown touchdown. Brownsville 34-yard line, working right to left as we describe it. Richardson out of the pistol. Inside handoff, going there again. Maurice Jackson between defenders, carries a couple of guys all the way down to the 16-yard line. Loaded pistol look here for the Red Raiders. Swaney gets the inside handoff. Swaney inside the 10, inside the 5. He might have went into the end zone.
Frazier.
Now 1st and 5. Comes right back to Praster, and Praster, a positive run here, but he lost the football.
He fumbled.
He's an H-back. And now Notorious Grooms comes in motion, and he'll get it here for the Red Raiders. Grooms inside the 10. Torrey's still going all the way down to the 2-yard line. So Notorious field for not only football but soccer as well. Another run here from Maurice Jackson, and Maurice Jackson bullies his way. Had Grayson in earlier. Branch took the direct snap, and he's going to get hit behind the line of scrimmage and driven back. Single coverage with McLee on the near side as Richardson takes the snap. He'll look for a throw on the far side. Little screen brought down, a little shake and bake into the end zone for a Uniontown touchdown. He has a protector back to each side. Low snap coming back. He picks it up. Quick screen. Pass complete on the far side. Tyler Hawk with a lot of room on the far side inside the 40-30. Hawk rumbling down the far sideline, and Hawk is going to take it 65 yards for a Uniontown touchdown. Branch will take this direct snap on 2nd and 9. Another inside run, and he'll bounce it out to the left side. And Brownsville, I believe, their 3rd first down of the night.
That's correct.
Taking it across the. So they're just planning on playing 8 games this year. They already had 1 bye week, and a late pitch going back here on the near side, and coughing up the football was. A motion here from Maurice Jackson. Snap coming back to Richardson, trying to turn the corner here on the near side, inside the 35-30. Richardson down the near sideline, 1st down and more inside the 10, and he will get into the end zone on a 4th and 9.
You may see him again.
We will see. That's not confirmed by any means. And lobbed down here on the near side and then dropped. Loose football. Red Raiders might have got on that.
No, yes,
they did. Tyler Hawk with the recovery.
Wow. That's
right, Dowd wrong, or we'll try to get reconnected here with Nickel. A late pitch going back there on the far side,
nice
down
run.
To the 37-yard line.
12 guys on the field until somebody ran off.
Line of scrimmage to Brownsville 38. Vargas coughs up the football here on the near side. Uniontown's recovered again here at the 41. So
And there you have it at your final score. Or Uniontown takes the victory by the final of 49-0 over the Falcons. John, Uniontown coming out in full force once again.
Yeah, they looked very, very good. And like we talked about a few weeks ago, they've just been playing great. I mean, Brownsville just can't really seem to catch a break right now, playing good school after good school, and it just seems like they can't buy themselves a win at this point.
Yeah, and a couple that plays to note about Richardson and the quarterback once again doing his thing. And Jackson and, well, the Jackson brothers, I should say, because there's more than one, just rushing the football on that. And shout out to the stepbrother Tyler Hawk on the 65-yard scamper to start the second half. And getting Braxton Swaney, Notorious Grooms, getting him involved in the backfield. Even with the senior class, it's going to be graduating here soon. this year after the season. Those guys that are going to be coming back next year, it's looking like Uniontown's got some good guys coming there.
Yeah, and that's always a good thing, is like whenever, all of your seniors, like who are supposed to be your best players, your very good players, once they're all graduating, having someone to fill that role and to take up their spot once they leave. And like you said, Uniontown has a lot of very talented football players on that team that are not only great now, but are going to do an even better job, I think, next year whenever they have to step up into a bigger role after all these players graduate.
And the road for both teams is not going to be easy next week. Uniontown will take on Waynesburg this coming Friday. Brownsville also having a tough opponent playing Myersdale. But we'll talk more about that in the schedules. Well, let's take a look around on the area for the other scores. So, John, what do we got?
Yeah, this week we had a couple of games on Thursday. We had a couple of games on Saturdays as well. So a mixed schedule all over the board. But starting things off, we had Greensburg Central Catholic taking on Fraser, and Fraser just having a tough time so far in the year. Similar to Brownsville, just unable to seem like they could even buy themselves a win, get blanked 47-0, and then moving on. A game with a little bit less defense. And you prefer Leechburg and Jeanette taking each other on. Leechburg able to get a nice victory in that one, 58-21.
And moving on here, we got Springdale visiting Clareton. And the the Bearcats doing some damage up there. 67-0 in that one. And then Burgestown and Our Lady of Sacred Heart in a close one, just by a field goal as Burgestown fends off Olsh for the win, 22-19.
And you mentioned earlier, a lot of games not very close, and these two games being one of them. Cornell taking on Bishop Canevin. Bishop Canevin putting up 63 and giving up nothing as they are able to defeat Cornell. Then Avella and Fort Cherry take each other on. Fort Cherry having a decent run this year, able to get the win in that one, 42-8.
This one still a lot of scoring by one team, but not as bad as those last scores we had. And the Chartiers, Houston, and the Buccaneers trying to get the ship on course for a victory. He beats Carleton in 39-8, and then Connellsville getting blanked by McKeesport 48-0.
Yeah, McKeesport have been having a fantastic year so far. Moving on, Ringgold and Latrobe facing each other off. Another shutout as Latrobe able to get the win in that one, 42-0. And then Trinity facing off Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson able to get a nice win this week, 45-10.
And then Belle Vernon taking on Greensburg Salem for the first time in a long time. And the Leopards blanked the Golden Lions 51-7. And then what I thought was going to be a lot closer of a matchup, Mount Pleasant and Elizabeth Forward, or the Warriors going up and sinking the ship of the Vikings, and 42-14.
Yeah, just Elizabeth Ford yet again just having another great game. Moving on, Southmoreland take on South Allegheny. Southmoreland, big win in that game, able to get the win 36-6. And then Brentwood taking on Waynesburg Central. Waynesburg Central just having a tough time this year as well. Fall once again 20-7.
And moving on as McGuffey, he traveled over to the pot at Charleroi. Boy, McGuffey coming away with that win in 43-7. Washington and Stowe Rocks, we thought this one was going to be a lot closer than what it actually was, but Stowe Rocks shutting out Wash High 36-0.
Moving on, we have Beth Center taking on Bentworth. My Bulldogs finally able to get themselves a win. Big win, 56-21 over the Bearcats. And in California, facing off against West Green, California able to bounce back after a couple losses, able to get the win in this one, 47-14.
Moving on here staying in 1A football as Mapletown remains undefeated as they beat the Rockets of Jefferson Morgan 49-12. And then this one was a close one for the Tri-County South as Monessen and Carmichael's got together. No defense in this one, and 40-36 as the Mighty Mikes pull off the victory.
And moving on, we had some good games around the area. Keystone Oaks facing off against Hopewell, and the Oaks able to get a nice win in that one, 26-0. And then we had Alderdice taking on Steubenville from Ohio, and the Ohio team able to get the victory in that one, 32-6.
And then Albert Gallatin playing host to University High from Morgantown, West Virginia, and the Colonials getting blanked in this one in their own home on homecoming night, 42-8. Butler, only their second loss of the season as they fall to Westinghouse, 39-6.
Moving on, we had Amani Christian taking on Apollo Ridge. Monty Christian able to get a nice win in a close game, 38-34. They made York taking on Sarah Catholic. Sarah Catholic able to get the victory in that one, 28-14.
That one a lot closer than we were anticipating. Moving on, we see Char Valley hold up to Newcastle. Another close one. And this one, 22-13. Char Valley, he pulls off the victory. Then Deer Lake's playing host to Valley E, and this one just looks like a bad baseball game from earlier in the playoffs. As looks like the Phillies versus the Cardinals from Game 1, but Deer Lake's with the victory, 7-2.
Yeah, I had to put it in there when I was making the graphics. I was like, I mean, you never really see a score in a football game like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of close ones as we looked at that one. Few that were quite the margin on that one, as well. And then that last one, and Deer Lakes, and 7-2. Like some of these scores this season have really surprised me. A year of the safety is we've talked about out of between the high school games, Seton Hill, who seems to be famous right now for it this year here for college football. But we're going to take a quick break, folks. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the standings. We also have the upcoming schedules and our pick'em games. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to High School Roundup, everyone. I'm John Sakaguchi. Still with me, John. John, we went through last week's schedule, and there were a lot of good ones, good matchups. This week, another batch of potentially good matchups.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of good games, and very similar to last week. Some games on Thursday this week that we'll talk about. Don't know why they're being scheduled on Thursday. There's some games on Saturdays too.
I was going to say, hey, there's a lot of games getting played on Friday. Like Thursday to Saturday, we got a bunch of different ones going on.
Too much football.
I
I don't think there's ever such a thing
I was
as
going to say, hey, this time of the year, I don't think there's never enough football. So what do we got on the schedule?
So starting off in the 4A Big 7 Conference, 3 matchups in that one: Latrobe at Connellsville, Laurel Highlands at Trinity, and then Thomas Jefferson at Ringgold.
LH coming off of a bye week, something you don't say too often in high school football. Moving on now to the 3A Interstate Conference, Bell Vernon at Mount Pleasant, and we have Greensburg Salem traveling up 119 to take on Southmoreland, and then South Allegheny coming down to play Elizabeth Forward.
And in the 2A Century Conference, Charleroi at Washington looking to bounce back after that loss to Stowe Rocks. Keystone Oaks at McGuffey, and then the conference leaders so far, Stowe Rocks at Brentwood.
Yeah, that Keystone Oaks McGuffey game, potentially a good matchup there. We'll keep an eye on that one. Moving on now down to 1A, the Black Hills Conference, Avella at Our Lady of Sacred Heart, Bishop Canevin and taking on Chartiers Houston, Fort Cherry at Cornell, and Carlinton and at Burgestown on Saturday. And again, you're talking about Saturday football.
And that's one of them. Then moving on to the 1A Eastern Conference, only 3 matchups in this one. Fraser at Springdale. We have Jeanette at Greensburg Central Catholic, and then Riverview at Leechburg.
Moving on now, down here to the Tri-County South, Bentworth at Mapletown. Beth Center are looking to keep the momentum they got from last week as they go to take on West Green. Classic rivalry in this one as Carmichael's takes on California, and Jefferson Morgan at Monessen.
And then moving on to the slate of non-conference games, we have Albert Gallatin at Weir High School in West Virginia. And Erie Cathedral Prep taking on Butler. We have Carrick at Wheeling CC at West Virginia as well. So a couple teams making their way out to West Virginia this week. We have one of our matchups that we were taking a look at. We'll talk about a little bit later. Gateway at McKeesport. We have Myersdale at Brownsville. And then you alluded to a little bit earlier, Waynesburg Central at Uniontown this week. And then finally on the list, we have Rochester at Clarendon.
Yeah, John, full slate of games here. I'm definitely going to keep an eye on that Weir High and AG matchup. Last year, I don't know if you got to hear about that one. It was an instant classic. AG escaped with the victory by a field goal holding that one. Looking forward to seeing how all things shake out again later this year.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because whenever I was in high school, my best center never really traveled outside of the immediate area to play anyone. So it's always interesting to see schools traveling to different states or schools from different states traveling here to play against these teams in the WPIAL.
Yeah, it's a different brand of football on, and it makes for an interesting evening, which is always fun to see. But we're going to take another commercial break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the upcoming schedule, or the standings and our pick'em games. We'll be back here on High School Roundup right after this.
More attractions. More fear. Survive the clowns in Twisted Nightmare 3D. Experience more scares than ever before. Haunted Hills Estate Scream Park returns September 9th. Get your tickets now at hauntedhillsestate.com.
Welcome back to High School Roundup for the final segment here. Still old John and John in the afternoon here for High School Roundup. But John, we went through all of the upcoming schedules, last week's schedules. So let's see how all that had affected them in the standings.
Absolutely, and like you said there, after all those games, there was a little bit of movement in pretty much every standing, starting things off in the 1A Tri-County South. Mapletown still sitting atop, undefeated in the conference and undefeated overall, 7-0 to start the season. Great season so far from the Mapes. And there's where the movement comes in. Carmichael's and Monessen both trailing just behind him. Carmichael's at 5-2, Monessen at 4-3. In California, 2-2 in the conference, 5-2 overall. Best center after finally getting a win, jump up from being in the bottom to now third from the bottom, 2-5 overall, 1-3 in the conference. Just behind them, West Green and Bentworth. Bentworth still looking for their first win in the conference.
Yeah, moving on now here to the 1A Eastern Conference. Greensburg Central Catholic still undefeated in conference play thus far, 5-2 overall. Followed behind them is Leechburg, who picked up their first conference loss last week, 3-1 in the conference, followed by Clarendon, who's also 3-1 and sitting at a 3-4 record, followed by sorry, my schedule will just decide to disappear on me there. So, sorry, with dealing with technical difficulties. He's Jeanette at Riverview, Springdale, and Fraser. Here to round out the rest of that, Fraser and Springdale both looking for their first conference win.
Unfortunate for them. Moving on to the 2A Century Conference, Stowe Rocks, after a big win against Wash High, sit alone at the top of the conference, 4-0 in the conference, 4-2 overall. Then three teams at 5-2 sitting just behind them, but McGuffey at 3-1 in the conference, Keystone Oaks and Washington at 2-1 in the conference. So the 2A Century Conference still up for grabs And then falling behind them, Brentwood at 1-2 in the conference, 2-5 overall. Charleroi 0-3, Waynesburg 0-4 in the conference, and Waynesburg still looking for their first win of the season.
Moving on now to the 3A Interstate Conference. Elizabeth Forward sitting at 7-0, undefeated, 2-0 in conference play. Also undefeated in conference play are the Leopards of Bell Vernon, who are sitting at 4-2. Mount Pleasant 1-1 in conference play at 4-3 overall. And just behind them are the Fighting Scotties of Southmoreland and 1-1 in conference play at 3-4. Also with a 3-4 record is Greensburg Salem, who's still looking for their first conference win. Also with South Allegheny at 1-6.
And moving on to the 4A Big 7 Conference, McKeesport still having a terrific season so far. Sit undefeated in the conference 4-0 and sit undefeated in their game 7-0 on the season so far for them. And following just behind them, 3 teams with 2 wins in the conference: Laurel Highlands, Thomas Jefferson, and Latrobe. Laurel Highlands at 4-2, TJ and Latrobe at 4-3. So fighting for that second place spot is still very close in there. Then following just behind them, Connellsville, Trinity, and Ringgold. Connellsville and Trinity sitting at 2-5, and then Ringgold still looking for their first win of the season.
Yeah, it's surprising to see TJ not only that far down the standings, but with more than 2 losses on the season, and it's astounding. Now moving on here to the independent teams, Butler sits at 4-3 overall. As they pick up their 3rd loss of the season after facing off with Westinghouse. Also, Uniontown moves up in the standings now at 3-4 for overall. Albert Gallatin falls to 2-4. Carrick, who we just added this week for the Independents, is 2-5, and then Gary's Brownsville Falcons still looking for their first win of the season. 0-6 on the season.
And then usually that's where we would end, but we've been including a lot of these games in our schedule and in our pick'em games because the City League has been great so far this season. So we might as well give them a little talk about here. Sitting atop of the City League is Westinghouse, who, like you said, just defeated Butler last week, and 3-0 in the conference, 6-0 overall. Following just behind them is University Prep and Alderdice, 2 teams that we've talked about plenty this season in our pick'em games. University Prep at 3-3, Alderdice at 2-5. Just behind them is Perry Traditional at 1-3 in the conference, 3-4 overall. And then sitting at the bottom, I mean, for one team to be really good, one team has to be really bad in the conference, and right now that is Brashear, 0-3 so far in the conference, and then 0-7 overall.
Now let's take a look here at our pick'em games for this week. John and you and I talked about this for about a good half hour, going back and forth on a couple of these. Most of them were no doubters, including leading it off here. Gateway at McKeesport, Carmichael's at California. This one I alluded to earlier on in Keystone Oaks and McGuffey. Sarah Catholic at Ligonier Valley, Greensburg Salem at Southmoreland, Erie Cathedral Prep at Butler, Steel Valley at Burrell, and rounding out our list is Southside Beaver at Laurel.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of these games very good, but like you said, we talked about it for about 25-30 minutes last night when I was making the graphics for the show today. And I know especially those last 2 games, Steel Valley at Burrell and Southside Beaver at Laurel, both teams, or all 4 of those teams, very good starts to the season so far, sitting near the top of their conferences and a lot to play for in those ones. But I think the biggest one I was keeping on was Gateway at McKeesport. I mean, McKeesport's been lights out so far this year.
Yeah, and I believe if McKeesport wins their conference game next week, that is a clinch on the title hole for the conference. Don't hold me to that. I got to do some research on that still. But I think we're getting to the point where we can say you can put a fork in that one and say this team, that team's going to end up winning their conference. I think Tri-County South also is pretty much a lock for Mapletown at this point. But going down through them all and looking through it, it's going to be fun seeing how a lot of these teams go down the stretch with only 3 weeks left to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of these games still matter. I believe, like you talked about, the Tri-County South pretty much taken care of by Mapletown unless there's some sort of a catastrophic throw in the last couple weeks of the season, which, I mean, anything can happen, but two teams fighting for those second, third place spots will be Carmichael's and California. And like he talked about, an instant classic, and those two teams, like one of the older rivalries in the area, and those two teams always play well against each other.
And then teams that I think we can both agree that are not safe yet on their conference titles. Looking back at that 2A Century Conference, and Stowe Rocks sitting at 4-0 in conference play. A one loss, and McGuffey or Keystone Oaks sneaks in there and jumps and leapfrogs them.
I mean, Stowe Rocks have already lost 2 games on the season, but like you said, they've been great in conference play. But one little bad week, one mishap, anything, and then one of those teams can jump right over them. And so it's going to be super important for both of those teams to be on their A game, because there's a lot on the line in that game.
I think the same could be said about Greensburg Central Catholic. Like 3-0 in conference play. Just behind them is Leechburg and Clareton at 3-1, and easily one of those two teams could leapfrog them for the conference.
Yeah, I mean, that's just we're at this point of the season where we're getting down to the wire. Only a few more weeks, a few more games left, and if you are one of these better teams, if you're leading in the conference, you have to stay perfect. And I know it's hard. There's plenty of injuries, and at this point, it's more about who's able to survive the injury bug on a lot of these teams. But you have to be able to be perfect, and you have to be able to work with what you have if you want to be able to win your conference.
Yeah, that's what we refer to as the next man up mentality. He had Coach Jeffries and Coach Fortuna beat that into my head for while I was playing in Uniontown for those days. But before we end the show, I want to give a quick happy birthday shout out to our friend Colin Kirkwood, the former host here at High School Roundup and CUTV. Happy birthday, good buddy. And that's going to do it for this week at High School Roundup. To everyone in the booth, I'm John Sakaguchi. We'll see you guys next time.
It's their fault they made me laugh.
Rolled on.